Hello everyone, DM Gashbad here. Well, I finally did it. I finally got in a game of Warhammer the Old World. Finally got a hold of the rules, read through the books, or most of them, I think I got most of it. Member of the gaming group offered a day for games, and so here we have it. And as always for the gaming group, we are going to start out small. We may even end up small, but we have long been fans of small Warhammer fantasy battles. And so for starting Warhammer Old World, I think it's a great idea to start with just a couple quick 500-point games. I think small games for Warhammer are great just in general. They're faster to play, you don't get hung up on any particular results because you're on to the next game. You get to try out a bunch of stuff that you wouldn't normally in larger games, and I think the Old World has a bunch of advantages for these games. First of all, we're learning the rules, so the less rules we have to learn for a starting game, the better. Also, the army lists themselves seem to lend themselves to these smaller games. A lot of people are complaining about Hero Hammer, large monsters like dragons, powerful heroes with all the tools. A lot of those options aren't even available until you get to 1,000 points. Also, the army lists just allow for smaller units in general in this edition. There's a lot of unit sizes that have been cut in half. Orcs can be fielded in units of 5, goblins can be fielded in units of 10. You have 50% character allowance, which means that it's a lot easier to fit some of those more expensive heroes, say in Ogre Kingdom's armies, that would otherwise be really difficult to accommodate in a 500-point game. So it's almost like they had this in mind when they set it up. But we're going to give it a good field test. For the game, I went and just made a ton of 500-point armies. 7 total. 4 of them were Orcs and Goblins. I had one for my main Orc and Goblin army, one for my Pirate Orcs, one for my Sylvanian Orcs, and one for the Orcs from the Chaos Wastes. On top of that, I was able to make an army list for Ogre Kingdoms, Warriors of Chaos, and Vampire Counts. Wasn't able to do Empire because I still am not able to get a hold of the Forces of Fantasy army lists, and I was just shy of being able to field a 500-point Skaven army. You can't take Rat Ogres in armies less than 1,000 points, so I didn't quite have the troops. But anyway, I put all the army names on a little card, I spread the cards out in front of my opponent, he drew one, and he drew the Sylvanian Orcs, specifically the Sylvanian Night Goblins. This is my all Night Goblin force. It's led by Mr. Grimley, a Night Goblin war boss. I get a Lord level character in my 500-point force. Not unusual for Orcs and Goblins. He's got no magic items because I was just overwhelmed by the magic item choices. I kept most of this stuff pretty simple. I gave him a great weapon and light armor. He's joined by Mortimer Durr. Mortimer Durr is a Night Goblin big boss. He's got the Battle Standard Bearer, light armor, shield, and a great weapon. This is kind of a holdover from Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition. I always wanted a BSB when I took a Goblin army, even in small point value games. But with the combination of the Warband and Horde rules, the Night Goblins actually have better leadership than a lot of other armies. I'm not sure the BSB is strictly necessary. Another character was necessary. At one point I was trying to save points to make my Squig herd a little larger, and I considered taking out the BSB, and then I realized, no, I need a Night Goblin character for every unit of Night Goblins I have in the army, and I wanted 2. So the BSB had to go in there, but I guess if you're really thinking about it, you could replace them with a Shaman or something. Anyway, the 2 Night Goblin units that I brought are the Green Reapers. Those are 20 Night Goblins with spears, shields, full command, and nets. And then there are the Unexpectrals, 20 Night Goblins with a musician, and they are holding 2 Fanatics. And as previously mentioned, I brought the Squitch Hunters. That is a Squig herd. It consists of 8 Squigs and 7 Herders. They are in open order because I didn't want to deal with moving all of them as skirmishers, and plus they could probably use the rank bonus. My opponent had brought an army from the Beastmen Brayherds. My opponent has a ton of different armies. I wasn't sure what he was going to bring. The Beastmen are a bit of a new one. It is led by a Gorebull. That's that hero level Minotaur character. He's got a lot of stuff. He's almost 200 points just by himself. He has blackened plate, which is full plate armor. He has a shield, and he has gnarled hide, which is going to give him a 2-up armor save. On top of that, he has the mutation Many-Limbed Fiend, which gives him an extra attack. So yeah, weapon skill 5, strength 5, toughness 5, 4 wounds, 5 attacks at initiative 4, plus a pile of special rules. He really is a beast. The rest of his units consist of 2 Razor Gore in individual units, a Chaos Spawn, and a Chaos Troll with an additional hand weapon. That troll's actually my model. His troll failed its stupidity check when he was packing up and wandered off. He also has 14 Gore with additional hand weapons and a True Horn, the champion. They really have the minimum core choice requirement stink all over them. To make things easier on ourselves, we decided to just play the pitched battle scenario. We've set up the board like this, leaving a nice open spot in the middle. We've got 2 forests on the left, a hill on the top right, and a building which we are treating as impassable, again just to keep things simple. Not a whole lot of subtlety to my deployment in the south. I put my Night Goblins with spears in the center, and both the characters went in there. Squig herds on the right, archers on the left. I put the archers on the left to counter the Razor Gore because it's got a bunch of impact hits and it's kind of a tough customer. I thought maybe the Fanatic should go against that. But then the Minotaur champion ended up on the other side, and really those Fanatics need to go against that guy. Granted, my opponent doesn't know that only the shortbow unit has Fanatics. I probably would have tried to take Fanatics in both units, but I didn't have any painted for the spears. Gotta have all the robes match, you know? Anyway, my opponent put a Razor Gore on each flank, and then a scattering of the big monsters, the Minotaur, the Troll, and the Spawn in the center, and the Gores kind of off by themselves in the center left. We're ready for the game to begin, and the Beastmen Brayherds get the first turn. The Troll passes its stupidity test, and everyone advances forward like this. They outrange my guys by quite a bit, so there's very little downside in them advancing aggressively. In the command phase, the Minotaur did go and roll on the Gaze of the Gods table. I became somewhat aware of this when I went to make my Warriors of Chaos list. It's just d6 roll. Some of the results will give you a 1-turn benefit. Some of them will give you a benefit for the entire game. And the worst you can get is stupidity, which really isn't that bad. Or at least I didn't think so when I was setting up the Warriors of Chaos list. The Minotaur champion only has a leadership of 7, so it's a bit more of a thing. Anyway, the Gorebull rolls up +1 attack, which is just making him scarier and scarier. Over to the Night Goblins, and there's not a whole lot for me to do. I'm already in range of the Razor Gores. I don't want to go out and meet a bunch of charges initially. I'm going to mostly stay where I am. The Squig herds do back up just a touch to get out of charge range of the Minotaur. The Night Goblins open up with their short bows on the Razor Gore on the left. The short bows now have the volley fire rule, which says that half of the rear ranks rounding up can shoot. From the reading of the rules, it sounds like each rank gets half of its models to fire rounding up. So you don't add up all the models in the rear ranks and then have it. You take half rounding up of each rank. Does that make sense? It works out that I'm firing with 9 extra shots as opposed to 8. Anyway, none of that matters because we don't manage to wound the Razor Gore. It's toughness 5 and it's long range, so it's not terribly surprising. Back to the beast herds, and we got 2 charges. The Razor Gore on the right charges into the Squig herd and makes it. That's a bad matchup. That's not going to go real well for me. And the Razor Gore on the left attempts a charge on the Night Goblins with the short bows. The short bows stand and shoot. Again, don't do any damage, but the Razor Gore fails the charge. Troll passes stupidity again. The Spawn ambles forward. The Minotaur moves aggressively in front of my lines. No magic or shooting for the Beastmen, so on to the close combat phase. In the command phase, the Minotaur again rolled on the Gaze of the Gods chart, and this time rolled a 1 and got stupidity. We believe the Gaze of the Gods rule comes after any stupidity check, so it's not going to affect him this round, but you never know, might affect him next round. With no magic or shooting for the Beastmen, we go on to the close combat phase. So the Razor Gore gets D3 impact hits at strength 5, which squishes a couple squigs. The Beastmen have this Primal Fury roll. It's a leadership test in the beginning of the combat phase, and if you pass, you get to reroll 1s to hit. I don't remember if it passed or failed. I believe because it's a war beast, it has to test on its own leadership and can't use the generals. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. When all is said and done, it manages to kill off 4 squigs. Because casualties are removed from the end of the fighting rank, that means I do get my full complement of 2 weapon skill 4 strength 5 attacks from the remaining squig, which is still in base-to-base contact. It manages to put 1 wound on the Razor Gore, but that's not enough. The Squig herd loses by 2, and I believe rolls an 8. Since my Night Goblin War Boss is right next door in a unit with 3 ranks, because of the Horde rule, that gives him leadership 9 due to the Warband rule, so that would mean that the Squigs fall back in good order. So they duck back about 5 inches, and the Razor Gore follows up into him again, which is not great for their long-term survival. Hey, quick note, a new FAQ just dropped, and they added in a little extra piece of errata. We were surprised to find that units with Swift Stride only pursued 2d6 inches. Well, that's different now. You now add the additional d6 from Swift Stride to pursuit and overrun rolls. So it's back to my turn in the command phase. I'm going to release my Fanatics. I was a little worried that my goblins with the short bows were too far out of position, wouldn't be able to use them against the Minotaur, but the Minotaur advanced pretty close, and so I think I can do it. Night Goblin Fanatics work a lot differently now, as you're probably aware. You hurl them out of the unit in the command phase, and you can place them anywhere within 3 inches of the parent unit. Although it doesn't say specifically, we assume that means the entire base has to be within 3 inches. Sometimes these things say entirely within 3 inches when they mean that kind of thing. It could be that they mean that only part of the base needs to be within 3 inches. But I don't think the Fanatics need to be any better, so we went with this interpretation. Anyway, I pushed them as far towards the Minotaur as I could. That still meant that I needed about an 8 to make contact with them. One did, which was great. The other one whirled out in front of my Night Goblins with the spears. The one that made contact did great, rolled the maximum 6 hits. Unfortunately, after the to wound rolls of 4+ and my opponent's armor saves, which went from 2+ down to 5+, I only managed to do 1 wound, which is probably about what you would expect, but I guess could have been better. So then there's the question of what to do with the rest of my forces. There's not much I can do about the Squig herd. They're just going to have to accept their fate. The Night Goblin archers are probably just going to have to chill where they are, same thing. But the spears, I don't know. With 2 characters in there with great weapons, they might be able to put up a little bit of a fight. So what I do is advance right behind the Fanatic. The thinking there is that if any of those bad guys arrayed in front of me wants to come fight those Night Goblins with spears, it's got to charge into the Fanatic. And it doesn't automatically kill the Fanatic anymore. Instead, the Fanatic pops out from the closest edge of the unit that landed on top of it. So if I position these guys right, and I think I did, it's positioned so that if anyone charges into the Night Goblins with spears, the Fanatic will pop out on the far side, not into my own guys. So anyway, that's the plan. I think the Night Goblins with the short bows try and shoot at the spawn this round. They don't do any damage. Over to hand. So again, the Razor Gore goes and crashes into my Squigs, killing off the remaining 4. With just herders in the fighting rank, we don't do any damage to the Razor Gore. We lose by 4, but again, we're not outnumbered 2-1. We make the basic leadership test, but don't make the modified one. That means again, we fall back in good order. An interesting aspect of having a battle standard bearer in this edition. In the old edition, it was pass-fail, right? If you failed, you re-rolled. If you passed, then you didn't. But this one's got this extra level to it. I was kind of close to the board edge, so I knew that falling back in good order could still be a problem. If I hit the board edge, I believe we just leave. Like, it's a flee move, and if you flee when you hit the table edge, then you're gone. So I think that's how it works, so I'd much rather hold. But the Battle Standard Bearer doesn't allow you to roll twice and then choose the best results. You get a result where you retreat in good order. If you try to get a better result, you might end up just breaking. So I rolled the retreat in good order. I decided not to push my luck. I just hoped that I would roll low enough to keep myself on the table. Well, I didn't. I went and ran off the board. Not terribly shocking. The Razor Gore pursued, but actually stayed on the table. So back to the Beastmen. The Troll and the Minotaur both passed their stupidity tests. The Gorebull again rolls on the Eye of the Gods table, and this time gets +1 initiative for this round only. And then both the Troll and the Gorebull go and charge into the Night Goblins. I elect to hold. I'm curious how this is all going to work out. So my opponent goes and sends the Chaos Troll in first. One of these 2 models is going to have to crash into the Fanatic. He wants it to be the Troll. Ideally, the Troll goes in, the Night Goblin Fanatic passes through him, and that leaves the Minotaur free to crash in somewhere in the front rank where he won't be hit. The problem is that those are some mean Fanatics. The Troll goes in and it takes a massive number of hits and instantly dies. Which is exactly what you would expect if you go and borrow one of my Trolls for your army, but funny nonetheless. The bad thing for my opponent is that now he's got this open spot in my fighting rank, and so he has to go and charge as many models as he can. And also, as far as I can tell, when the Fanatic pops out of a unit landing on top of it, it doesn't go an inch away. The rules say that it goes out the other side by the smallest amount possible and still not touching it. And since the Troll's on a 40mm base and the Minotaur is on a 50mm base, it's still going to end up on this Fanatic. So now the Minotaur goes in, takes the Fanatic hits, and eats another wound. That went a lot better than I thought it would. At least I'm not going to get totally skunked in this game. I've picked up the points from a Troll. I'm going to get some victory points. In other news, the Razor Gore on the left completes its charge into the Night Goblin archers. The stand and shoot again does nothing. The Chaos Spawn goes and randomly moves into my spears to help out the Minotaur. The Razor Gore that destroyed the Squig herd U-turns and ends up behind my Night Goblins with spears. And the Gor Herd stands around continuing to fulfill the core unit requirement. My opponent chooses to do the Razor Gore combat first. The Razor Gore smashes 4 Night Goblins to death and takes no damage in return. I believe we think the Night Goblins lose by 2 because I have completely forgotten about the close order rule. The Razor Gores are open order, I am close order, I should be getting a +1 combat result. Regardless, I am still a chicken, I roll up, fall back in good order, but here is where we find some accidental genius by my opponent. When you fall back in good order, you pivot directly away from your opponent. So center of unit to center of unit. That means that I'm actually retreating a little bit back and to the right. That means with another good fall back in good order roll, I actually pass through the edge of the other Razor Gore that had positioned itself behind both of my units. I got to go through that entire thing, pop out the other side, and that pushes me off the table again. I asked my opponent, did he have that in mind? Did he know that was a thing that could happen? And he brilliantly set all that up to cascade in that direction? Thankfully, he said no. I mean, unless he's tricking me and he actually is a 4th dimensional chess player. But that is something to keep in mind. If a unit ends up behind another unit, it can really mess with these fallback moves. Okay, so I've pretty much lost 2/3 of my army. I think we all see where this is going. Let's see how badly the Gorebull and the Spawn maim my last remaining unit. First thing we got to do is nets. Nets work exactly the same as they used to. I choose one unit that I'm fighting, I roll a d6. If I get a 2 through 6, they're down 1 strength. If I roll a 1, then my unit is down 1 strength. Well, I rolled 2+, and I decided that I was netting the Gorebull. I had to think about it a little bit. They've both got a lot of attacks. I was going to challenge out the Gorebull anyway, but I was just really intimidated by the number of attacks that the Gorebull was throwing out there, and I thought maybe I'll get lucky and the Spawn will roll really low on its number of random attacks. So the Gorebull goes down to strength 4, which is nice because it does have an impact hit. It is challenged by my champion and he has to accept. The impact hit doesn't kill the champion, which is probably good. The rules are a little fuzzy as to what happens if you're in a challenge and a model has attacks that happen at different initiative steps. Impact hits, stomps, that kind of thing. It says a beast that you're riding will attack even if you kill the model that you're fighting, but it doesn't specify for that other stuff. We figured the most logical thing to do would be to allow the Minotaur all of its attacks. But when all is said and done, it actually only manages to knock 2 wounds off of my champion, which of course kills him and gives him 1 overkill, but that could have been a lot worse. The Spawn does okay, I suppose. It kills off 2 more Night Goblins. The Gorebull is locked in a challenge and so can't be attacked by anyone, but my Night Goblin war boss is in contact with the Spawn. So he gets his 4 weapon skill 5, strength 6 attacks with the great weapon, and manages to execute the Spawn on the spot. Nice job, Mr. Grimley. Didn't expect that. When all is said and done, the Night Goblins win that combat 8-4. Well, we probably figured it as 7-4, because again, I think we're forgetting close order. And since we outnumber the Gorebull 2-1, he has a real shaky leadership test to make, which he fails. He turns around and flees and goes straight through the Fanatic. Seeing that, not wanting to go through the Fanatic, and not necessarily really wanting to fight that Gorebull at all, my Night Goblin successfully restrain, which is a little bit dicey because we don't get our warband benefit to our leadership for our restraint tests, but we do manage to do it. Also can't re-roll it on the Battle Standard Bearer, so real nice. Anyway, the Gorebull is hit by the Fanatic another 6 times, takes 4 wounds, and only manages to make 1 armor save. 3 more wounds, more than enough to kill off the Gorebull. The general of the opposing army is dead. This is amazing. Not only that, because I restrained pursuit, I get to reform. I'm going to turn around and face that Razor Gore that chased off all my supporting units. Night Goblin turn and we go crashing into the Razor Gore, heck yeah. In compulsory moves, the Fanatic on the right goes and crashes into the house. It either dies or sets up a nice little cottage there to live out the rest of its days, I don't know. And the other one rolls a double on its random movement and also chokes itself to death with his own chain. In the close combat phase, my opponent very helpfully points out that I have nets, and I say, oh yeah, I almost forgot about that, and promptly go and roll a 1 and net myself. Thanks, buddy. The Doom Pig only has an initiative of 2, so even with the great weapons, my war boss still strikes first and kills off that as well. Looking great. I ignore the pig on the left, reform to face the last major threat on the table, the almost assuredly inconsequential unit of Gors. So back to the Beastmen. The Gor Herd is not exactly sure what to do with this unit of exceptionally feisty Night Goblins. They do have a movement of 5, so they go and stick themselves just over 9 inches away from my Night Goblin host. Normally that would mean that if I was going to charge them, I would need a 6, which is not terribly unlikely with the Warband rule. You get to re-roll the charge distance. You're just looking for 1 6. But I would have to make a wheel, so it probably takes me out of my maximum charge range. The Razor Gore is kind of stuck on the flank of my Night Goblins. We figured the best thing for it to do for this round is to just reform. So it just circles around. I think when you pivot, you can ignore enemy troops. So I think this is okay. Back to the Night Goblins. Can't charge the Gores, they're too far away. Can't charge the Razor Gore because it's in my flank. We just back up 2 inches. Gets us out of sight of the Razor Gore, gets us a little bit further away from the Gores. It's really what we have available. Beastmen turn. I'm still within 11 inches of the Gor Herd, so they go ahead and declare a charge. Managed to roll themselves a 6, managed to get in there. I'm not too scared. Again, we're a little bit generous with where this Razor Gore can go. Maybe he passes March test, maybe we're just kind of generous with the reform move. He ends up like that. So, close combat phase, and here's where I find out that these Gor Herds have a lot of special rules. First off, they have their Primal Fury roll, which they manage to pass, and they pass it with a double. So that means that not only do they get to reroll 1s to hit, they also get Frenzy. They also get to use their pointy horns on the charge, meaning they are +1 strength. I believe I do net them, so they go back down to strength 3, but they still manage to kill off 5 of my Night Goblins. Because my guys have spears, I still have 3 Night Goblin attacks, which don't do much, and then I've got 3 attacks from Battle Standard Bearer with a great weapon, hitting on 4s, wounding on 2s, and 4 attacks from the War Boss, hitting on 3s and wounding on 2s. These go and underperform, and I only kill off 2 Gores. So, the Gores have a rank and killed off 5 guys, giving them a combat resolution of 6, because they are open order. I've got a standard, a battle standard, a rank, and I killed off 2 guys. That gives me a combat resolution of 5, if you forget close order, which I did. If I had remembered close order, it would have been a draw, and I would have won because I had a musician. Not only would that have given the Gores a very shaky break test of 6, 7 to fall back in good order, but they would have also lost their frenzy, and I would have not have done this. Again, I didn't manage to roll under my leadership, I didn't risk the reroll for the Battle Standard Bearer, and I fell back in good order. That meant the Gores got to pursue, which meant they got their +1 strength again, plus the initiative bonus for the next round of combat. Night Goblin turn, straight onto that, and I go and net myself. So now the Gores are at strength 4, I'm down strength. I don't remember if the Gores passed their Primal Fury or not, but they still managed to kill off another 5 of my Night Goblins, and I completely bomb my rolls with my characters. I only kill off 1 measly Gore. Again, I forget close order, so we think that it's 6 to a 3. It really should have been 6 to a 4, but it doesn't matter because I completely ruin both of my break test rolls. The Night Goblins flee off the table, and I lose. Lesson to everyone fighting these games, especially people who are fighting beast herds because a lot of their stuff is open order. Remember your close order rule. It's really important. Anyway, that was a crazy game. Setting up, I thought to myself, well, this is a big problem. I don't think these Night Goblins are going to be able to stop all these big monsters charging at me. And sure enough, it looked that way with my supporting units getting chased off very early on. But then those Night Goblins with the spears and their static combat res really did a number on the monsters and the Minotaur. Between them and the Fanatics killed off a Troll, a Spawn, a Razor Gore, the Minotaur. Did real well. And then, like from out of nowhere, these Gores show up and just wreck me. We were shocked at how good these basic Gores were. 7 points a pop, additional hand weapon, piles of rules. So many bonuses when they make their leadership test and charge. So yeah, Gor Herds, if you're playing small games, give them a try. I mean, if they had just gotten, say, a standard or a musician, they may have been really difficult to deal with. So that's the battle report. Let me know if you have any questions, observations, concerns, maybe some rules you think we got wrong. I feel pretty good about how we did it. But again, this is my first game, my opponent's second game. I think I'm going to save my thoughts on the system as a whole until after I've played a bunch of these 500-point games. I'm a little surprised more people aren't doing these. This worked out pretty well. It was a surprising amount of back and forth. I thought one side would dominate the other and then just one side would collapse and that would be it. But this turned out to be kind of a crazy game, which is a good thing. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.